Do you want to know what's happening in the Finger Lakes? We do too. We're going in depth with decision makers in the heart of upstate New York to get the answers you need. From the team of FingerLakes1.com, this is Inside the FLX.
Today on the show, we're talking about family foundations. What do they do? How do they work? How does one even come about? To the layperson not involved in nonprofit work, those are very real questions. In simplest terms, these orgs set out to be nimble and solve problems. My guest in studio last week was Judy Wentzel. She's the executive director of the Bonafiglia Family Foundation, which is one such entity trying to solve big problems in Seneca County. We covered a lot of ground, including the work they intend to do in the future, but we pick things up with the basics of operating a family foundation.
The foundation was established in December of 2021. The Bonafiglia family, as you know, they own Bonadent Dental Laboratories here in Seneca Falls. The family has always had sort of an active presence in our town and in our community, in giving and supporting local initiatives, causes, projects, etc. And so I think the time had come for the family. Bruce kind of has moved away. Bruce Bonafiglia has moved away from president and CEO of Bonadent, and his daughter, Danielle Bonafiglia Worth, moved into the president CEO position. So some changes with the family professionally and their business, but knowing that long term, they always want to have a presence here in Seneca Falls in terms of their giving and supporting the community. So that's what really sparked the reasoning behind the establishment of the foundation. And so it was established in December of, like I said, of 2021. And then in 2022, they provided a large contribution to the National Women's Hall of Fame to support the induction ceremony that year. And then in 2023, they said, okay, what are we going to do next? Who are we? What do we want to be about? I think we need to hire somebody, full time to help us kind of live out our mission and our vision and develop a framework for us and help us with the day-to-day. And so that's kind of how I came onto the scene. And the foundation is also made up of board members, 4 of them being family members: Bruce, Danielle, his daughter, and Erin, his other daughter, and then his sister, Andy Bonafiglia. And then a few non-family members who are Jim Senecropi. We know him well.
We know him.
And Christy Miller, who is an attorney here in town, and then a real estate attorney, and then Bob Markle, who is also a resident of Seneca Falls and works over at Finger Lakes Health and does some finance there. So it's a good group, and so we got together and kind of had started to sit down and say, okay, who we are, what do we want to be. Let's start to educate ourselves on the local landscape. What are the needs? What are the gaps that we need to fill? And sort of go from there and see what happens.
Why was it appealing for you? Why was this opportunity appealing for you in terms of mission or just work that the foundation was going to be doing? Why did it seem like something that was the right fit for you?
Yeah, well, honestly, it was kind of one of those things that, fell into my lap a little bit. So I had done some volunteer work with Danielle with the Run Towards It event that went on and helped out with that. At the time, I was working for Hobart and William Smith Colleges in the athletic and recreation department. And so we partnered with her on some of that event. And so had a little bit of engagement with the family at that point. Obviously, being born and raised in Seneca Falls, know the family, have some personal connections. And so when the time came, when they were looking for an executive director, they had come to me and asked if I might be interested in the position. And for the past almost 10 years, I had been working at Hobart and William Smith Colleges, really great place to work, loved it very much. And I think, honestly, that experience really helped to prepare me to step into this role. And I was, ready for something different, ready for a change. And I thought, wow, what an opportunity to kind of help create something from the ground up to support, a place that I love and people that I care about in my community. So I was like, why not?
The foundation is still very young, so still very much in its infancy, right? So talk to us a little bit about how that mission has evolved from the very beginning and how it's still very much kind of being worked out, how this is going to look in a giving and community base moving forward.
Yeah, so that's a good question. You know, for myself as the executive director for the Bonafiglia family and the board members, we're all very new, you know, to the world of private philanthropy. Well, maybe not the family, but in terms of how you operate a family foundation and how that all works. And, you know, something that I think is important for folks to understand is, there's public charities and there's private, you know, non-operating foundations, and that's how we exist. And so what that looks like is the family is sort of the predominant sole contributor to the foundation, whereas public charities, right, you're soliciting for donations and you're going out into the community and getting monetary support, whereas the Bonafiglia family predominantly, you know, monetarily is supporting the foundation, and through that, we are providing essentially grant awards through some of the work we do. So that's one piece of it, is distributing grants. And then also a lot of, I think, the work that we will do is what's called direct charitable activities. So, for example, last December, we worked with the Seneca County School District, their student councils in the middle school, high school, and fifth grade. And we did this tree decorating initiative where we decorated mini Christmas trees and delivered them to the local nursing homes. So, right, that wasn't where somebody asked for money and we kind of distributed a grant, right? This was a project that we sort of worked very closely on with the Seneca Falls School District and went into our community and kind of provided that service. So there's going to be some of that work that definitely goes on. And like I said, this other component where it's this grant making. And in learning about how foundations operate, there's predominantly two types of grant making. And the one is responsive grant making. And that is something we definitely we've done this year with the Call for Ideas grant that we just rolled out, where we distributed money into the foundation, into the community. And that was where different groups and organizations came to us asking us to fund certain projects and initiatives. The board sort of reviewed those proposals and then made decisions, and then we distributed that money into the community. And then there's the other component where we sort of kind of seek out projects and initiatives, and we identify gaps that exist within the community and say, hey, this really aligns with our mission and our vision, and I think we're going to kind of partner with maybe a specific group or organization and then sort of do it that way. And so that's responsive grant making. So I think right now we've started out, it's proactive grant making. So right now we're very heavy with responsive grant making, I would say. It's more, and that's a way for us to learn, right? That's a way for us to kind of see, hey, what does the community need, right? Yeah. We're asking you to kind of share with us your story, what you're about, where you think the needs are in the community, and that helps us to identify some gaps. And then I think as time goes on, like as you mentioned, and we kind of grow and evolve, it may be more of those strategic initiatives and alliances and partnerships that we focus more of our attention on to really sort of impact the community, I think, in the way that we want to, and be able to kind of have this presence in our community to be a leader and make some positive change. So.
When you talk about essentially asking the community or asking different organizations to put their best ideas forward, to seek out some of the grant money that's available through that program that you're describing, I'm curious, I've had dozens of conversations with folks who work in the nonprofit world over the course of this program now for 10 years. And the number one piece of feedback, and I guess frustration, that a lot of the folks who work in the nonprofit world feel is just the lack of feedback sometimes from the community. Yeah. They know there are problems and everybody looks around the community and can identify problems, but finding folks who maybe have answers to those problems or ideas on how to address some of them can be a challenge. When it came to the feedback portion of that process you guys went through, what was that like? Was it a trickle? Was it fast and furious? Was it kind of a slow burn to ramp up, or how did that look?
Yeah. So when I first came on through in my position, I was like, okay, how do I do this? How do I be successful in this role? And I will say, the philanthropic community, obviously philanthropy, family foundations, these organizations, they're extremely open. And so a lot of it was me reaching out to other foundations and asking other executive directors and staff and saying, how do you operate? How do you engage with your community? Explain to me how you found to be successful over the years. Dan Fessenden, who is the executive director of the Emerson Foundation in Auburn, he was super helpful early on. And so I went to him and kind of talked to him a little bit. There's the Florence Mueller Foundation and in Penfield, and their executive director, I talked to her. So there's a lot, it's a sharing community. So to that point, once I had those conversations, I recognized I needed to sort of go out into the community and have these like listening sessions. So I met with a lot of non-for-profit organizations and said, hey, I'm the executive director for the Bonafiglia Family Foundation. We're trying to kind of establish our direction and our vision and figure out how we can support our community. Can I set up a time to sort of listen and learn about what you're all about? So I pretty much did that all of last year and tried to figure that out. And it was a very humbling process for sure, and a lot of information. I felt like I was thinking about things even when I wasn't thinking about them, you know what I mean? My mind was like information overload. So that helped us roll out some of the stuff that we're doing this year and some of the things that we're working on. And I think it was really obviously well received, somebody wanting to go out into the community and ask and listen. And I do think that these groups need help. And I do think that there is a gap in terms of nobody is really taking on a leadership role to facilitate these conversations, right? With some of these organizations, and maybe bringing groups of people together who are sort of doing the same things or have common goals for the community, and kind of saying, okay, food insecurity is a major issue within Seneca County. You have the United Way, you have all these local food pantries, you have the House of Concern, you have all these different organizations that are assisting with that cause. Being an organization that has relationships with all these different entities that are supporting, say, an example like food insecurity, how can we be a leader in helping to maybe guide and support these organizations in a way to start to really maybe move forward in solving, or not maybe solving, but helping to lessen the burden of some of these issues locally?
It sounds like it would be easier for an organization like the foundation to involve itself with all the different players in these various issues, whereas some organizations may be siloed off a little bit or be restricted in some way, shape, or form because of how they function. Is that kind of how you guys are a little more able to freely move within these problem areas and work with more folks instead of perhaps having to be siloed off with just, say, the United Way or just with a specific pantry or that sort of thing?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's a lot with family foundations, there's a little bit more flexibility. We have a lot more like control in terms of kind of our giving and what we want to do. And I think as time goes on, we understand we can't be everything to everybody and have the level of impact that we foresee for the community. So I think right now, we are pretty open to sort of learning what's going on. And like I said, kind of identifying these gaps, but then also being mindful of the foundation's resources and our bandwidth, and then starting to say, okay, from all of the stuff that's going on, again, what do we really align with? What do we really feel like fits what we want to achieve? And then start to maybe hone in a little bit more. I think, right now we're broad, and I think that's an important part of the process. But I do think as we continue to move forward, we will sort of narrow in and define ourselves a little bit more, just so that we can, like I said, have that level of impact we envision ourselves having for our community.
So before we go any further, and I want to talk about some of the issues or some of the big themes that you guys are seeing crop up in Seneca County. But first, let's sort of break down for us past giving, say over the last 6 months, first 6 months of this year, and then what is sort of on tap or what's currently in the works for the foundation right now.
Yeah. So as I mentioned, so at the beginning of this year, we established sort of 2 different kinds of responsive grants. The one is happening on a rolling basis, and that's to support local fundraising events and sponsorships. So you have your annual golf tournaments, your galas, and that's something that really helps the community also with the transition of giving from Bonafiglia Dental Laboratories, right? The family did a lot of their giving through their family business and then transitioning to the foundation. So it's something they're kind of common, the community's common in terms of asking the family or, for that type of giving. So folks 501c3 organizations can go online, and we have an online application where you fill it out and you submit it, and the board reviews those sort of at the end of each month. And so that's one way that we're currently active in the community. And then, as I mentioned, in the beginning of January, we did this call for ideas, and that was something, again, for us to develop a little bit more understanding of what's going on in the community. And that was a little bit more where we're, initiatives, very project oriented, could ask for general operating funds, which I think is a big thing to point out, is some of these state and federal grants that are available to these nonprofit organizations. They're very specific in terms of what you can apply for and how you utilize that money. Yeah. What's nice about the family foundations and community foundations is there's a little bit more flexibility in terms of how you ask for funding. And so, through we had an info session in the beginning of January. We had like 40 different groups and organizations on the call for that. And then basically through January through February, worked with different organizations who were interested in applying, talked to them, tried to understand what their need was, and sort of supported them in submitting their application, their proposal. And then the board reviewed those, and then we distributed those. And through that process, I would say, we identified a lot of themes where, like I said, the food insecurity bit, we gave money towards food pantries and community gardens, a lot of initiatives that are supporting that. Another big theme was local events and festivals. The foundation is very interested in, supporting local tourism and community engagement and synergy. So we supported a lot of funding proposals that were kind of centered around events and community events and festivals, and then workforce development and education piece. A lot of these non-for-profit organizations, right, just even in the for-profit world, they're stretched super thin. Their staff is very little. They're wearing several hats, and also the opportunity to develop a certain provide professional development and capacity building. So we focus some of our giving through this grant opportunity on that. And then youth. So youth programs, services, opportunities to provide, programming outside of school, focused a lot on supporting daycare services and after school programs and local libraries. So that was really sort of the buckets that we hit with this recent grant opportunity.
Covers a lot of territory.
Yeah, it does.
And I'm curious, when you think about all of those issues together, what stands out to you maybe as the most concern when you look at the community moving forward over the next 5 or 10 years? What stands out to you as maybe the most pressing of those issues that are present and being addressed by foundations and organizations like yours. But because of the things you mentioned, for a lot of these nonprofits, they're working with really small budgets, really small staff, a lot of volunteerism in the process as well. Do any of those sort of seem like a leader in terms of most concerning?
Yeah, that's a good question. I'm still learning, as I mentioned. I'm still new to this. But one thing I think is definitely something that there's going to have to almost be some type of shift in, right, the way that we think about moving forward, right? The systems that we have put in place are no longer really working, and we need to start thinking more creatively on and outside the box in terms of how we support our community. And in terms of these non-for-profit organizations, I mean, they're so spread thin, again, like I said, with staff and just the need in our community, right? So you have organizations that have maybe 3 to 4 staff, and the ask that's coming in, from our community to support is a lot, and it's super overwhelming, and in a lot of ways it's unrealistic, right, to maintain this sort of speed that we're at. And I think it's a big challenge, and I don't have the answer in terms of how that's going to be solved. Maybe I will as I keep going, but right now I don't have the answer to that. But that is to me something that I think collectively, as a community, as organizations that are helping to support, right, these causes and initiatives and are supporting these non-for-profit organizations, we need to start sort of looking and saying, okay, what we're doing right now isn't working. And we've got to start to think a little bit more outside the box on how we move forward. So that piece of it, in terms of, I guess, the capacity building, the need to support those organizations that are supporting our community, we have to figure out a way to do that in a better way. And the other piece is youth, I guess. That's another big piece of it, right? Our youth are our future, and there's a lot going on. Obviously, we all know that Seneca County is, we're struggling in terms of some of our population, and we need to support them. And our youth is a big part of that. And so that's another big piece that I think we will continue to focus on, for sure.
Need is growing as population is declining. It's a challenge that a lot of rural communities across upstate New York are dealing with. Yeah. Where can folks learn more about the foundation? What's the best way to sort of see what the foundation is up to day to day, week to week, month to month?
So, you mentioned, what are we doing in the future? I think another piece I haven't really touched upon is we are very focused on the revitalization of downtown Seneca Falls, the economic vitality of our community. And right, youth is a part of that, obviously, but I think, we're interested in how do we bring people into our town? How do we strum up business within our downtown? How do we support existing businesses? So in terms of what we're looking to do now or sort of in the future, that's a big piece that we're focused on when we sit in our meetings and we have discussions. We're focused on, okay, how can we support and revitalize downtown Seneca Falls? And how you can figure out sort of what we're up to is we do have a website, and there's some information on there. We have sort of a news feed, right? So you can kind of keep up on what we're doing and things like that. We definitely try to encourage other organizations that we partner with to also kind of spread the word and communicate on what they're doing, because I think it's important. We're supporting these initiatives and projects, and we want people to know the good work that they're doing or what's going on and where the need is. So, based on some of the organizations that we partner with, looking on their sites and on their news feeds to learn a little bit more. And then, obviously conversations like this at fingerlakes1.com, we're trying to, again, bring awareness to our community about what's going on, where the need is, how we're trying to support, where we think, others might be able to support. And thanks for the opportunity for us to come and talk a little bit about that.
And we're certainly going to be doing it again. Judy, thanks so much for coming in today.
Yeah.
We appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Thanks for watching and listening to this episode of Inside the FLX. Check the show notes for links to everything we discussed today. And remember, new episodes of the show drop every Monday on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and the iHeartRadio app. If you have a question or a suggestion for a future episode, email news@fingerlakes1.com and download the fingerlakes1.com app for the latest breaking news. For the entire team here, thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next time.